Order, order. Liz Twist to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms Murray, and it's a pleasure to serve with you as chair for this debate. This debate is about lessons to be learned from the collapse of the Football Index. Now, I had a debate on the Football Index in June 2022. So why am I here again? Well, it's because I was alarmed, Mr Murray, to read reports in the Times and in The Guardian just a few weeks ago which talked about a new platform, HoC, which used the Football Index as a proof of concept and linked some of the people previously involved in Football Index as being involved in HoC. Mrs Murray, I do not want to see my constituents once again caught up in a scheme which replicates the problems we saw with the Football Index. We need to learn the lessons. Now, the collapse of the supposed betting platform Football Index was marred in controversy, as you may know, as the site proved to have been incorrectly regulated for the majority of its lifetime. These regulatory failures have affected tens of thousands of people across the UK, many of whom have lost substantial amounts of money. I'm sure most members in the room and across the House will have received emails from constituents who have lost life savings, struggled with their mental health, and dealt with putting their lives back together in the face of that failure. So just to give a quick recap, the Sheehan report, which the Government commissioned, was damning in its verdict that there were regulatory failures from both the Gambling Commission and the Financial Conduct Authority in working to protect customers from the Football Index. According to the Sheehan report, these failures go back to the beginnings of the platform. The Gambling Commission were made aware of the go-to-market function back in April 2015, but did not note this feature during the licensing process. Other aspects of the platform's likeness to a stock market were also not considered by the Commission at the licensing stage, and its terms and conditions were not subjected to detailed scrutiny prior to 2019. At this point, the report states that the Gambling Commission became aware of the full nature of the product, but they didn't suspend the platform's licence for another 2 years. And this is crucial, Mrs Murray, as had the platform been taken down in 2019, it could have saved some customers huge amounts of money. It's also noted that during this time, the Financial Conduct Authority expressed inconsistent views as to whether the platform fell under its remit or not, and that they were driven by resource prioritisation rather than by their legal responsibility to protect consumers. Mrs Murray, these failures cost victims dearly, with many of them losing their homes, their life savings, their wedding funds, causing them huge amounts of stress, anxiety and depression, not to mention financial difficulties for some. My constituent Colin spent months unable to work as a result of this stress. He told me, "I feel a massive sense of guilt and anger that a huge amount of my family savings has been stolen. That money could have been used for my children's future, for house improvements, for holidays and other investments." Indeed, many victims are reluctant even to come forward due to the shame that they feel that they could have been misled in such a way. Now, this hasn't been helped by the language of the government, who referred to support for problem gamblers in their response to the dormant funds consultation last year. To be clear, no one should have to feel shame due to struggling with gambling addiction, but this framing negates the fact that this product was branded by its promoters as an investment product. None of these victims walked into a bookies and put £3,000 down on an accumulator or on a race. They were misled and instead believed themselves to be investors, taking risks, hedging funds and building a portfolio, something that would be normal for those who engage in a stock market. To suggest otherwise is to let the platform and the regulators off the hook. Now, there are unanswered questions. Since my debate in June 22, there have been 3 different Prime Ministers 4 Secretaries of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and 4 ministers responsible for gambling. But as of yet, no one has been able to make much progress with this vital issue. In that time, I've heard countless more stories of the hardships suffered by victims as a direct result of these regulatory failings. Together, their financial losses amounted to as much as £124 million. They are desperately waiting for action, dealing with uncertainty and fear that they might never see justice, that they may never be compensated. Now, I'd like to pay tribute to the journalists who've been fighting to keep this issue within the public domain. Joey D'Urso at The Times, Ellie Pitt at ITV and Greg Wood at The Guardian, who have all helped to tell the story of the victims and given them a voice. I would encourage the Minister and those in attendance here to attend the All-Party Parliamentary Group hearing on the 30th of April next week, so that they too can hear firsthand from those affected. And it's important that we do keep the focus on this because so many questions remain. Whilst the Sheehan report was fundamental to exposing some of the regulatory failures, the text itself references the significant time constraints under which it was produced and that it could therefore not take in the full amount of evidence that has since come to light. Now, some of these victims have lost everything and they deserve to have their voices heard. Having secured a meeting with the Minister back in 2022, the Football Index Group have continued to gather and develop evidence that strengthens their case. However, having met with the Football Index Group myself, as I understand it, the government have not accepted a submission from the group. Now, I am grateful that the current Minister has met with representatives of the group, but after 3 long years, they deserve more. They deserve action. There are ongoing concerns related to what the regulators knew and when, and whether there were additional opportunities to prevent the eventual outcome that were missed. It's my understanding that the current Minister was sufficiently concerned by what he'd heard to consider an independent review of the evidence by someone external to the Department and the Gambling Commission. No doubt the Minister will tell us himself exactly what he's been doing, but the Action Group are still waiting for progress on this issue. If we are to learn lessons from the collapse of the Football Index, then there must be proper independent scrutiny of all the available evidence. And I hope that the Minister will commit to this today. Turning to the novel products, such a process of examining what went wrong with the Football Index, Mrs Murray, is vital so that we can protect people from such harm in future. Unfortunately, recent developments have made this matter all the more urgent. Now, as I said at the start of this debate, in a recent Times article, it was revealed that the co-founder of the Football Index platform is working with others to create a new trading platform, citing Football Index as proof of concept. Mrs Murray, this is deeply worrying. I can only imagine the frustration and anger that victims must feel upon hearing this news, concerned that others might be let down in the way that they were. The new platform, KICS, will be a new football cryptocurrency trading project, making use of non-fungible tokens and cryptocurrency. The Minister has previously said that the Gambling Commission has strengthened its approach to novel products, and I understand that the Commission is currently reviewing elements of the KICS product. However, the Commission have also said that the product may lie outside the scope of the regulation, given the involvement of NFTs, I'm not going to say the whole words again, and crypto. In April 23, the government set out plans to overhaul gambling and admitted that the Football Index blurred the boundaries between gambling and investing. Where Football Index blurred the lines, KICS is seemingly crossing over altogether to create a similar product in an unregulated market. Mrs Murray, having seen the impact on Football Index victims, how could we possibly permit another product that preys on football fans, persuading them to part with hard-earned income and invest in their knowledge of football? I will give way.
Thank the honourable member for giving way and congratulate her on securing the debate. Would you agree with me when she talks just now about preying on sometimes susceptible fans in terms of gambling? one of the big emerging problems in the past few years has been this virtual epidemic of gambling companies sponsoring almost every single Premier League team, to the extent that young people think and see their heroes as part of the gambling industry, and that is compounding the problems that she's quite rightly analysing today.
Well, I thank the honourable member for giving way, and of course we could have a whole different debate on the influence of the gambling industry on football, and I'm sure we will in future months in that area. But certainly today, that link between clubs and professional players, with or without their consent, is actually being used to attract people to put money into this. So I fear that this product is dangerous and has the potential to bring misery to more users. I would therefore urge the Minister to do everything he can to ensure that this platform does not launch without the utmost regulations in place. To put it simply, it's the very least the victims of the Football Index deserve, and we don't want to see the creation of more victims through these measures. I'd also like to bring to the Minister's attention another product, Stocks FC, which has been operating in the crypto space for about a year now, I am told. Alarmingly, a quick glance at their website and at the head of marketing's Twitter account shows the dangers of this type of platform, clearly masquerading as a stock market and manipulating in its language, suggesting to people that they're investing and sharing the totals of profits made on their investment. I'd also add that despite this allegedly being crypto-based platform, there are no entries on the blockchain, and users in the UK can deposit money straight into the system from their debit cards. I'm sure the Minister will agree that this is deeply concerning and a danger to consumers. So does the Minister know if the Gambling Commission are aware of this operator, and if so, what discussions has he had with them to ensure that consumers are being sufficiently protected? Many of the victims from the original Football Index collapse are vulnerable and eager to recoup their losses through any means, and I fear that new platforms could prey on that vulnerability. I do hope that the Minister will take up these concerns with the Financial Conduct Authority, and that both the FCA and the Gambling Commission will work in partnership to ensure that no one will be left victim to an unregulated football stock exchange ever again, consulting with the Football Index Action Group to learn from the real-life examples. Mrs Murray, the evidence regarding the regulatory failures that led to the collapse of the Football Index is highly compelling. It serves as a reminder that we cannot let anything like this happen again. Meanwhile, victims have long-standing grievances that are yet to be resolved. People across the country will now be willing the government to respond to the new platform of KICS in a serious manner, and to review in full the evidence that the Football Index Action Group has sourced and put together. I hope that the Minister will listen to calls from the victims, because for the victims it's quite simply the least they deserve. Finally, I would welcome any updates from the Minister on this subject. At the heart of this scandal is injustice. We need to develop a plan that seeks to compensate victims of the Football Index collapse effectively, while working to ensure that any future platforms, such as KICS, cannot be launched without strongly learning from the lessons of this scandal. Mrs Murray, I move.
Thank you. Can I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate? The question is that this House has considered the lessons learned from the collapse of the Football Index. Justin Madders.
Thank you, Mrs Murray. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon. And can I start by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Blaydon, for securing today's debate, and actually for the work she's done over a number of years now in highlighting this issue and actually raising future or existing problems that also need to be tackled. So we know the Footballing Index has been described as the biggest scandal in British gambling history, with thousands of customers losing cumulative losses of up to, as we heard, £134 million. And it is a scandal, it is a failure, and I'm sorry to say we're all getting rather too used in this place to saying that once again people have been let down. Be it the sub-postmasters, the waspy women, the leasehold scandal, infected blood, the loan charge, mortgage prisoners, Equitable Life, or the myriad of other investment scandals that have seen people's life savings stolen. Too often we end up saying in this place that what has happened was totally wrong and it should not be allowed to happen again. But yet again, that is where we find ourselves today. It is little wonder that public faith in our elected representatives continues to erode when we see as a place to be incapable of learning from past mistakes. Be it regulatory failure, be it loopholes, be it bad actors, this place seems unable to stop them. Consumer protection and other basic safeguards for our citizens seem to have gone missing in action. We are failing in our basic duties. Light touch regulation clearly has had its day. And as we heard, we know of the terrible stories of those affected by football index, losses into 7 figures, individuals driven to the brink of suicide, marriages collapsed, families torn apart, life savings vanished, impacts that actually have been in all the other scandals I've mentioned. And I think there's far too many people in this country who have suffered grave injustices that we seem incapable of putting right. So the football index, as we know, has been described as a Ponzi scheme. And as we've heard, we know that the executives of Football Index were warned soon after its launch, as early as 2016, in fact, that their so-called football stock market would prove to be unsustainable. And all these warnings occurred some 5 years before its eventual collapse, leaving serious questions, as we've heard, about how effective regulation was. According to reports, the Gambling Commission were warned in January 2020 that Football Index was, and I quote, an exceptionally dangerous pyramid scheme under the guise of a football stock market. Well, we all know that proved to be correct, and perhaps it is the unusual nature of the product that meant that they carried on without effective intervention. But actually, having looked at Trustpilot reviews for many of the major online gambling companies, there are a litany of tales about frozen accounts, withheld funds, and appalling customer service. It seems that even the more straightforward gambling propositions are able to get away with far too much. So it should be a little surprise to us when an unusual scheme that was unsustainable by design should also escape attention. But turning now to the FCA, they took their time as well to get involved and were also indecisive, changing their view twice as to whether the Football Index fell within their regulatory remit. And on 2 separate occasions, in September 2019 and September 2020, when they did indicate that the Football Index fell within their remit, they didn't follow up with any adequate action, and the product continued to be unregulated in a proper way. And those who used Football Index talked about it being advertised as an investment product, with only a very small note squirreled away on its website, which actually said what it really was, which was a betting scheme. So while FCA regulation allows for redress for losses through the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, because this was considered gambling, although not overtly advertised as such, the attempted failures to regulate it mean that the losses continued and were allowed to stack up. The Gambling Commission has now updated its framework as to how they assess risks, so the novelty of the product is now fully considered, and licences will now, we understand, not normally be issued if a product's name contains language associated with financial products. And the FCA now also have, I understand, an executive director to oversee their relationship with the Gambling Commission, where these kind of products that appear to cross over boundaries relate to. But the reality is that despite those actions, nobody has been held to account for this. Even those originally involved in the company have got away with it. The Insolvency Service, who I wrote to, decided there was insufficient evidence to justify directors' disqualification proceedings. So those people who created a Football Index in the first place are allowed to carry on with impunity. And I've already mentioned that is so wrong because they knew and they were warned from the very start that it was unsustainable, but they carried on anyway. Which, of course, leads us now, as my friend mentioned, to KICS, which talks about digital athlete tokens, which represent the on-pitch performance of individual footballers and are deployed as smart contracts on the blockchain. The KICS website says that the owner of a digital athlete token becomes eligible for twice weekly winnings. I don't really know what that means, Mrs. Murray, but it has a familiar ring to it, and that's because, as we've heard, some of the people behind Football Index are part of KICS. And that quote I just gave about digital athlete tokens means it's as clear as mud to me whether this actually should be regulated by the FCA or the Gambling Commission. Perhaps it's neither. KICS is apparently, and I quote, a decentralised autonomous organisation which apparently has a decentralised, egalitarian and democratised blockchain ethos. And if that word salad isn't enough to put you off investing, I hope someone somewhere is going to take responsibility for regulating this and actually understands what that means, because we have let people down, and those kind of products do need properly regulating and policing, because we really don't want to end up here again in another few years bemoaning our lack of action. I've had too many constituents ripped off by one investment scheme or another, and the lack of accountability, the lack of justice, and I'm sorry to say sometimes a lack of interest from those whose job it is to ensure there is justice, says to me that we are letting people down on a systemic basis, and we have to do better, much, much better than we are at the moment.
Yeah. Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. It's a pleasure to speak with you in the chair today in this debate. And I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Blaydon, on leading this debate and on her excellent work on this issue. I have two constituents who were affected by the collapse of the Football Index in 2021. One constituent told me that he had lost £20,000 as a result of that collapse. He said, "I am a father and soon-to-be husband whose family has been swindled. The stress, guilt and shame which this has brought in such an important part of mine and my family's life. This has put me in some very dark places, and I've had thoughts and stress like I've never experienced before." Failings by a number of organisations led to this impact on customers, and this was highlighted in the government's independent report into the regulation of Football Index led by Malcolm Sheehan KC. First, the report found that Bet Index Limited, which traded as Football Index, did not properly notify the Gambling Commission of the nature of its product in its licence application, nor did it inform the Commission of changes to its product as it should have done. Second, the report found that the Gambling Commission could have responded better, including better scrutiny of the product offered by Bet Index in 2015, better monitoring of the development of the product, and quicker decision-making once it identified in 2019 that Bet Index appeared to be operating outside the scope of its licence. Indeed, as my right honourable friend for Blaydon said earlier, if the platform had been taken down in 2019, it would have saved money being lost by a number of the victims. Third, the report identified areas of improvement for the Financial Conduct Authority, including its speed of response to requests from the Gambling Commission and the consistency of messaging on its regulatory responsibilities. Now, it's welcome that the Government has committed to implementing the recommendations of that review, and that in September 2021, the Gambling Commission and the Financial Conduct Authority agreed an amended Memorandum of Understanding, including on response timetables and the process for escalation of unresolved issues. However, I understand people like my constituents and so many others still feel very upset and very angry at the loss of capital as a result of the collapse of the Football Index, and some believe that there were further failings of the regulatory bodies which were not identified in that independent review. In particular, people feel misled about the nature of the product that they were using. One constituent told me about this: the magnitude of the deception that took place by the Football Index, which positioned and promoted itself as a safe investment with apparently guaranteed yields. My constituent also said that this attracted a significant number of users who were wholly misled as to the nature of Football Index product and the degree of safeguards pertaining to its regulation. Now, there is a need to improve financial literacy to help counteract financial products which are misleading, purposely misleading and confusing, aimed at exploiting customers for greater profit. And unless lessons are learned from the collapse of Football Index, there exists a risk that a similar situation could now emerge through new platforms. Like my right honourable friend for Blaydon and others in the debate, I'm particularly concerned by reports about the new trading platform called KICS, which is using the Football Index as a proof of concept. The Times has also reported that KICS is being advised by the co-founder and chief executive of the Football Index, Adam Cole. As we have heard, users of KICS will be able to trade footballers using non-fungible tokens, But because KICS is a decentralised autonomous organisation underpinned by the blockchain technology used by cryptocurrencies, it's not currently regulated. Its website says that KICS is beginning with football, but may expand to other sports if successful. Campaigner David Hamill has called the development of KICS a real kick in the teeth for all those people affected by the collapse of the football index. So I would be interested to hear from the Minister whether the government has had discussions with regulators about how to protect people from the risks of this latest scheme. Returning to the issues caused by the collapse of the football index, it's important that the government does fulfil its intention in the Gambling White Paper to protect vulnerable people from gambling harms and financial detriment. This situation should never have been allowed to occur, and it must never be repeated. I look forward to the Minister reassuring us here on behalf of our constituents that it won't be.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Chair, first of all, can I congratulate the Honourable Lady for Bladen for bringing this forward. And the Honourable Lady will recall a debate that I think that was held about last year sometime when the Honourable Lady led that debate, and I was very fortunate and pleased, Madam Chair, to come along and support the Honourable Lady as I do in Westminster Hall, support other members regularly.
Every day.
And it's always a pleasure, by the way, because I tell you, the issues are really important. And the Honourable Lady is right about this issue. It's important. It's important because some of my constituents have found themselves in this terrible, terrible malaise of where they are, lost money and all the other things. So really, this is it's good to return to this subject. I'm very pleased to see the Minister in this place. We're very pleased, if I don't mind the Minister, me saying this to the Minister, to see the Minister in this place, because he always tries constructively to come back with and answer the questions and the queries that we pose to him. I was remarking to him earlier that he performed really well in the football governance last night, Madam Chair, and indeed his final comment, they think it's all over. It is now. I'm old enough to remember that saying in 1966, because maybe some of the other members, I know the Shadow Minister is far, far too young to ever remember that. But some of us, well, a whole lot of people on this side aren't. I'm very careful what I say now. Don't say too much. I'll be reprimanded. So I took part in the last debate on the impact that the football index has had on all our constituents. Some of mine, I'll not mention their names, but I'll refer to them. So it's really good to be back here to discuss what lessons have we learned. And that's why this debate's really important a year later, because it's about what have we learned and what has changed. And I think that's the question that the Honourable Lady for Bladen has posed. What has changed? And hopefully, Minister, you can reassure us when it comes to answering. The collapse of the football index was detrimental to so many people. It undoubtedly financially ruined some. I know some of it did. Sadly, I know that it's not for to be able to have it on record, but just to say that I see the detrimental effect that some people have had. It's also highlighted the importance of being gambling aware. It's important that we get it right this time and next time round. The Honourable Lady, forgive me for our Caroline Harris, what's constituency? Swansea. I would hope that maybe the Honourable Lady might be here, but she's not here because she's been such a stalwart into the fore of gambling issues. I admire her greatly. I think it's one of the subjects that she's taken with real enthusiasm here in this House to try and make changes. What really is our football knowledge worth, Madam Chair? Football's first stock market with fantastic prospects of making money based on how well you knew football. Well, I know a whole lot about Leicester City, but I've been a loyal supporter since 1969 when I was a wee boy at school. That wasn't yesterday, by the way. I now age me greatly when people do the figures. But the point I'm making is, I don't know all about football, but I love football. And most people who are probably in this here love football and may not know all the ins and outs of the subject matter before them. The financial losses of this collapse being absolutely devastating. I've read some absolute horror stories from people within my constituency to further afield. Some losing hundreds of thousands of pounds that have been invested in open bets for football players and their performance. It's also my understanding that after the company folded, it went with £124.5 million in remaining open bets. Wow. Isn't that, Madam Chair, truly extortionate? And it gives the magnitude of this, what we have here before us today, and why this debate is so important. Madam Chair, some 67% of people in Northern Ireland have been said to gamble, a range of ages and a range of sports and indeed other means. And my honourable friend Patrice today referred to all the other sports and the implications that it has for it as well. Firstly, individuals must be aware of their gambling habits and the potential dangers that come along with it. Reports have suggested necessary recommendations to any similar scheme in the future. And one point that we must get right is ensuring that any gambling company offering long-term bets will be able to cover payments to customers. This is also to be covered by the government's forthcoming gambling white paper. I probably look very forward, Madam Chair, to hear what the Minister's got to say about the government's white paper and how that white paper will address some of the issues that we have before us today. If it doesn't, with respect, Minister, then I think we need to see how it can be strengthened and enforced, and others will make contributions. And I'm sure if my honourable friend on the right-hand side is to speak, but he also has I say this with respect, he's great knowledge of this subject matter, and I'm hoping at some stage he will intervene and give us some of his thoughts of wisdom on this matter. I mean that honestly, Madam Chair, because the honourable gentleman does have a particular grasp at the situation before us today. Ensuring customers can get I don't know.
Things are impromptu. The issue we have here is when it comes to gambling products that we understand, there are rules and regulations in place. They're not to my liking, but they're there. This scheme and what we're hearing now, successor schemes, have been designed to work in the grey areas, in the dark shadows of the gambling, and for the FCA. The FCA didn't even know if they were responsible for this. So hopefully all these years down the line, we're in a situation where somebody can hold these companies to account, because their will is not to create an exciting thing for football fans to get more involved with and enjoy the game of football. Their will is to take money out of people's pockets. There's plenty of gambling products out there which we know are already doing that. So I'm really hoping that the government today, and I'm not sure there's much in the white paper at all that touches FI. There has to be something that says the regulations are clear and understandable and stop KICS, because if KICS is up and running behind it, there's plenty of other organisations waiting to do exactly the same thing, and all they want to do is extract money from punters' pockets.
Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I thank the honourable gentleman for that intervention? The honourable gentleman has posed a few questions, I think, which are pertinent to this debate today. And I know that the Shadow Minister for Scots, and indeed the Honourable Lady, the Shadow Minister, who I look forward very much to their contributions and the questions that they will in turn pose to the Minister. But we really do need to see a sea change that does away with the grey areas that the Honourable Gentleman has referred to, that does away with where the uncertainty lies and where people could get sucked into a process. Ensuring customers can get their money back is of major importance. EDM 697 was tabled on the 25th of November 2021. I'm pretty sure it was the Honourable Lady for Bladen that was instrumental in posing the EDM and ensuring that others signed it. I did sign to show support that the government should do more to ensure that those who are owed money receive a full reimbursement. I've stated before, Madam Chair, gambling is a personal choice, so I'm not here to tell anybody what to do or shouldn't do. I will always try to give people choice if I can, but at the same time, sometimes government has to encourage people to be more aware of what the choices are. And they're quite clearly, as the Honourable Gentleman said in his intervention, there are occasions whenever it doesn't happen, and why it's important to have a system in place. So when gambling, well, it's a personal choice, we would hope that those choosing to do so are educated on the potential risks. However, the losses are huge. I read of one story, I've thought about it long and hard, and I was a young boy, young man, probably in his early 20s, but he lost £165,000. My goodness, he lost what he didn't have. He found himself in all sorts of problems, and he stated that it completely turned his life upside down. And how could it not, to have lost that amount of money at an early stage of your life? Many have openly referred to the same that they feel, and that this happening to them has had a positive impact as to how they look at gambling. There is absolutely no doubt that the Financial Conduct Authority should have regulated the football index and there are still questions to be answered there. Now, I know that may not necessarily be directly the Minister's responsibility, but I would really like to know what discussions have taken place with the Financial Conduct Authority and how and what they're doing to regulate this as well. And there are still questions to be answered. Well, it's argued that if I was seen as an investment as opposed to gambling, this was still a business model relying on money from constituents. And it was undoubtedly fundamentally flawed, as some of my constituents are able to confirm and release. Many people state that they feel let down by the regulators, and more should have been done to ensure that this system was working the correct way. I conclude with this, Madam Chair, for I'm very conscious that there are others who want to speak, and I am looking forward very much to the two shadows in particular, and also to the Minister. Consumer protection must be at the heart of the lessons that are learnt. The FCA have held a consistent view that all the products fell within the regulatory perimeter up until the collapse of March 21. Very clearly, evidentially, that is no longer the case. And therefore, the legislative change that we need to see and the reassurance we need to issue, and legislatively, it's always better to put it in black and white. So I have hope that the action can be taken to support those who suffered losses as a result of this. And I also urge the Minister in particular and our government to move efficiently to ensure that victims are not waiting years for reimbursement. I think it's unfair that they should. I think we have a chance today to debate and urge the Minister to grasp that. I commend the Honourable Lady for Bladen. Honestly, I'm putting this forward. I think there's nobody in this room today that doesn't think that the Honourable Lady has done exceptionally well. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Jill Furness.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairpersonship, and I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for Bladen for bringing and securing this debate on such an important issue. It is one that has caused a great deal of suffering for thousands of people. Several years ago, I met with a group of parents outside Hillsborough Stadium whose loved ones had tragically taken their lives after struggling with gambling addiction. They were the victims were mainly in their 20s and 30s. They were taking part in the Big Step, walking between 5 Yorkshire football grounds, calling for an end to gambling, advertising and sponsorship in football. 35 clubs from across the UK have signed the Big Steps pledge to eliminate gambling advertisements in football, while Premier League teams have agreed not to take front-of-shirt sponsorship deals from gambling firms from 2026. However, this leaves us in the nonsensical situation where we recognise the dangers posed by gambling sponsorships, but are happy to relegate them to the sleeves of football kits and advertising hoardings around the stadium. Despite research showing that only 5% of gambling logos shown during the live Premier League football match would be affected by this front-of-shirt ban, and in my opinion, that's 5% too many anyway. We need to do far more in order to combat the blight of gambling sponsorship in sport, and I remain disappointed that the government's white paper on gambling reform, which required a cross-sport gambling sponsorship code of conduct to be introduced, has seen continual delays. And I would like the Minister to mention at the end when actually this bill will become law, and whether will he actually investigate the KICS operation, which is now operating instead of the FI. Sadly, any changes to the legislation around football sponsorship are too late for the users of Football Index. Prior to their collapse, Football Index sponsored the shirts of 3 Football League teams. These sponsorships deals helped we'll get myself back into I've got hay fever, sorry, so struggling with it. Helped convey an aura of trust and respectability that might not have otherwise existed, furthering the dupe that they were an investment platform, as we have heard. Football Index themselves were more than happy to play into this misconception. Internal company documents reveal that Neil Kelly, the director of Bet Index, the Jersey-based company which ran Football Index, said, "The Football Index platform functions somewhat similarly to a stock market. Hence, for marketing purposes, it is sometimes referred to as the football stock market. And when the company uses this term, it is deliberately misspelled as the football - stock market. As one of the previous speakers said, This is actually working in the dark shadows of the law. It is, completely unacceptable, and I really hope that the Minister will be putting this right. This deliberate misspelling may have reassured directors that they were not operating a stock market, but that distinction was less than apparent to their customers. The Guardian reported that the only hint on its website that it was actually a betting site was an easy-to-miss strapline, which was added several years into its existence at the insistence of the Advertising Standards Authority, who had previously complained that the language used by Football Index was synonymous with the language used to describe conventional stock markets and investment products. The Gambling Commission had been made aware of these concerns, having been warned in January 2020 that tens of thousands of users have been misled into believing they are investing rather than gambling, with little or no consideration that all of their money was at risk. And that platform was a little more than an exceptionally dangerous pyramid scheme in a formal submission by industry experts. But the misleading nature of the platform meant there was a reluctance from both the Gambling Commission and the FCA to take ultimate responsibility for regulating the product, to the detriment of the thousands of Football Index's victims. Let us not forget, consumers have rights, including a right to redress if a product is missold. Customers in a regulated industry like gambling have the right to expect that the regulations will be adequate, appropriate and diligent. The users of Football Index have been wronged. The regulatory failings have cost thousands of people dearly, and they deserve compensation for their losses. But beyond that, we need real systematic change. Football is watched by millions of young people every week, yet they are still subjected to constant gambling advertisements. I fear without urgent reform, more consumers will fall prey to similar products that intentionally blur the lines between gambling and investing. Will the Minister commit to helping ensure that the Gambling Sponsorship Code of Conduct is introduced as soon as possible? Thank you.
SNP spokesperson Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am very pleased to participate in this debate, and like others who have spoken before me, I wish to congratulate the Honourable Member for Blaydon for bringing this debate forward, because it's very important that we learn the lessons and remember the mistakes that were made about the collapse of the online gambling product Football Index. And I also wish to pay tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Inverclyde, who himself has done a huge amount of work on this issue and on the field of the wider gambling context generally. I remember well when Football Index collapsed in 2021. I remember a number of constituents contacting me in despair, some having lost significant sums of money in what they believed was an investment because it had been marketed as such. And it was deliberately marketed to look like a stock market of football, where customers could invest in players, collect dividends based on performance, and sell their shares in the player at a profit if the player did well. But when operations were suspended, customers lost more than £90 million in open bets, i.e. investments in players. And what became clear is that Football Index was akin to a pyramid scheme, operating unsustainably until its collapse by paying customers dividends using new customers' investments. And this collapse represents the biggest collapse of a gambling product in the UK, and relatively speaking, it hasn't attracted the attention that it ought to have done. We know that the Gambling Commission had been warned some 14 months prior to the collapse that it was, and I quote, an exceptionally dangerous pyramid scheme under the guise of a football stock market. Its business model was fundamentally flawed and spiralled out of control. Now, the issue is, as we've heard today, many of those using this platform were not fully cognizant of the fact that they were indeed gambling, participating in a pyramid scheme dressed up as something quite different. And if you don't know that you're gambling, then you can surely not be fully aware of the risk to which your money is exposed. The reality is that Football Index's deliberate imitation of an investment product led to unparalleled levels of irresponsible gambling from thousands of users who were misled into believing that they were not gambling, but investing, and obviously had no idea of the risks to which they were exposed. And there is unanimous agreement today in the Chamber, and I'm sure that the Minister will be listening to that very carefully, because all of this was contained in a report to the Gambling Commission, which did nothing, and indeed rejected these warnings, as it didn't consider that there was enough evidence to show that the undertaking was fraudulent. And it then transpired that the Gambling Commission was not properly notified of the nature of this product in its licence application, nor was the regulator informed of changes to the product after its launch as required. There has clearly been an absence of scrutiny, and one might say an absence of curiosity in some quarters, given the concerns raised about the platform. The Football Index was never regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, but areas for improvement for this body have been identified, including the speed of response to requests from the Gambling Commission and consistency of messaging on regulatory responsibilities. Now, from the perspective of the constituents who contacted me about it, and I'm sure it's the same across the Chamber, the financial losses have been significant. For some, they have been life-changing, putting strains on family relationships, future plans, and still there has been no redress for those who were told they were participating in an investment instead of a gambling opportunity. Indeed, the only hint on Football Index's website that it was actually a betting site was an easy-to-miss strapline, which was added, Madam Chair, added several years into its existence, and only at the insistence of the Advertising Standards Agency. And this has happened because of spectacular failures in regulation, which allowed a gambling product to masquerade as a financial service or investment platform without the regulation that would suggest. And those who were fooled by Football Index, because they were fooled, those who were fooled should not pay the price of this failure of regulation. That is only adding insult to serious injury. Now, I know that the Minister will say when he gets to his feet that gambling losses cannot be made good by taxpayers' money, but I would draw his attention and the Chamber's attention to the words of David Hamill, one of the spokespeople for the Football Index Action Group, and he said, and I quote, "The regulators don't actually cost the taxpayer any money. They are funded by licence fees, and they also contribute to the Treasury by way of fines and settlements. There is a net surplus since Football Index was first licensed in 2015, approaching £1.3 billion or £1.4 billion, and that has gone into the public purse. And what the Football Index Action Group want to see is a mere 10% of that sum to be reassigned to use as redress, and that would not directly involve taxpayers' money."
Can I just say,
I will indeed.
Just briefly, I'm mulling these numbers around in my head here. £90 million is the figure was lost, but it wasn't lost. It's there somewhere. Someone's got that money. It's in a bank account somewhere. It didn't just disappear into the ether. And we're trying to get redress for people who've lost tens of thousands of pounds. If we identify that money, surely there's a way, even if it's maybe in a bank account in Jersey, there has to be a way of paying redress to people who lost it in the first place.
Thank you. Thank the honourable gentleman for that point. But I also would urge the Minister to look carefully at the words and the suggestion of David Hamill from the Football Index Action Group. I agree with Mr Hamill, and I want the Minister to consider his proposal as to how redress can be managed for the victims of this scandal. It almost goes without saying, but I will say anyway, that such a fundamental regulatory failure must not happen again. And yet, we've heard members in the House today raising concerns about the co-founder of Football Index being involved in a new trading platform that has striking similarities, chilling similarities to the one under discussion today with the new name of KICS. So I hope the Minister will use his role to ensure that regulators keep a very tight, close watch on this new product to ensure that the same mistakes are not repeated, and that it's clear to all users of any site, whether it is a gambling site or an investment site. There should never be any dubiety that the customer has to work through. It should be clear and front-facing. And I'm sure the Minister will agree that this must not happen again, but I do ask him to think very carefully about the suggestion from Mr Hamill about how we can recompense users of Football Index without directly using taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Opposition spokesperson, Stephanie Peacock.
Thank you, Mrs Murray. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to the Honourable Member for Blaydon for securing this important debate and, of course, for all the work she has done on this important issue. The collapse of the Football Index 3 years ago was devastating for many people up and down the country, as we have heard from members here today. Football fans have been told they could put their money and confidence in players who they identified as rising stars and were promised that they would be paid dividends if they were correct. It was advertised as the world's first football stock market, which was misleading to users, as they believed they would be using their football knowledge they had gathered over years to make money on the scheme rather than participating in gambling. After administrators were called in, the collapse took an estimated £90 million in customer funds. Victims have formed the Football Index Action Group, and I pay tribute to their work, and they are campaigning to ensure that the events that led to the loss of this huge amount of money should never happen again, as the member for Ellesmere Port spoke so well about. Some users lost hundreds of thousands of pounds, as the member for Strangford highlighted. And following the collapse, the Gambling Commission decided to suspend BetIndex operating licence in 2021, who owned the Football Index. The government then conducted a report published by Malcolm Sheehan QC into the events surrounding the establishment and the subsequent collapse of the Football Index, with the intention of learning the lessons from the mistakes made. The report concluded that BetIndex failed to properly inform the Gambling Commission of the nature of the product in its licence application and did not inform the regulator of changes to the product after the launch as they were required to. The Football Index Working Group have included this amongst their criticisms of the model, arguing that everything about the index sought to brand it as an investment product rather than a betting site, as the member for Sheffield Brightside outlined. Indeed, one of the index's two main features, the go-to-market feature, was not communicated to the Gambling Commission as part of the initial application. This flouted the Gambling Commission's expectation of openness and transparency during the process. The government report also found that there was potential to improve the Gambling Commission's handling of this incident too. In the first instance, reports that the Gambling Commission was made aware of the issues with the Football Index in 2019, which was still 2 years before the collapse of the product, are extremely worrying. Questions remain around why the Commission failed to act sooner, potentially mitigating some of the effects of the collapse. The report recommended that the Commission take a number of steps, including carrying out greater scrutiny on the new gambling-related products intending to come to market, consideration of the effect of language user on consumer understanding of gambling products, and prompter decision-making and action. Furthermore, the report also suggested that the Financial Conduct Authority could have done much more to help and recommended improvement of regulatory cooperation between the Commission and the FCA. Now, it is welcome that the Government have committed to implementing the recommendation of the Sheehan Review in full, as the member for Worsley said. People feel that they have been let down by both the Football Index and by the regulator, and argue that they should never have been put in this position without intervention to prevent cash losses. They remain angry, and the government must learn from this incident to ensure that others do not find their capital at risk in the same way. Now, in an age where advances in technology have allowed betting and gaming industry to develop rapidly, it is right that we work with the industry to ensure that consumers are protected from potentially harmful schemes, whilst allowing those who gambling responsibly the ability to continue to do so.
Thank you. My friend's making an excellent summary of the failures of Football Index. I, like others, had constituents who lost large sums of money in Football Index. I am very concerned here that a new platform called KIGS has been set up with the involvement of Adam Cole, one of the founders of Football Index. It's a football cryptocurrency trading platform modelled on Football Index. shouldn't the government ensure that the FCA and the Gambling Commission both look into kicks at this early stage, ensure the appropriate regulatory activity happens this time so we don't see a repeat of Football Index?
Stephanie Peacock.
I thank the Honourable Member for that intervention. I'm going to come on to that in just a moment. Now, the rapid growth in technology and our growing awareness of the impact of gambling harms, changes to our gambling regulation are now long overdue, and it is important that we reverse our gambling legislation to avoid incidents such as the collapse of the Football Index in the future. Those who flout the rules of the regulator should be punished for their actions so that customers can be sure that those operating within the market are legitimate. However, this is sadly not been the case, as reports emerged this month that co-founder of the Football Index, Adam Cole, is now helping to launch a product similar to the Collapse platform. This will be released as the new football cryptocurrency trading project called Kicks, as has been mentioned today. Now, the Football Index Action Group spokesperson David Hamill described this as a real kick in the teeth for victims, and I'd like to raise these concerns with the Minister and ask him for an explanation as to why Adam Cole has been allowed to be an integral part of a new platform that mirrors the Football Index. Now, we have heard from members today about the devastating effect that money lost through the Football Index has had on the mental health and lives of users. It is clear, therefore, that more must be done to ensure vulnerable people and families are protected. The Labour Party welcomes the measures outlined in the Gambling White Paper with the intention of protecting vulnerable people from gambling harms and financial detriment. Examples like the collapse of the Football Index outline the serious threat that not having the right legislative and regulation protections in place can cause to consumers. I hope the Minister will listen to the concerns of the Football Index Working Group. I hope he can tell us what the government has been doing to ensure this can never happen again and how they have learned from past mistakes. Thank you.
Minister Stuart Andrew.
Thank you, Mrs Murray. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Bladen for tabling this debate. I know she also moved a debate in 2022 on the impacts of the Football Index collapse, and I would like to acknowledge the contribution that she has made to ensuring that these events receive the attention that they deserve. She is an admirable representative of those in her constituency and others who have been affected, and the government appreciates, and I certainly do, the impact that these events have had on them and many others. And I'd like to personally offer my sympathies to all of those affected financially by the collapse of Football Index. And I'd also like to thank all honourable members for their contributions today. I also want to say thank you to David Hamill for his campaigning work on behalf of the people who have lost money as a result of these events. I have met with Mr Hamill, and I know that he has engaged administrators, regulators and politicians on behalf of those affected. Today's debate has been very valuable, and I commend all those who have contributed for their thoughtful comments. It's been important for me personally to hear the perspective shared this afternoon on this important topic, and I want to be clear that both myself and the government recognise the serious consequences that the collapse of Football Index has had on consumers. As I've said, I sympathise with all those affected, and it is important that we ensure that a similar scenario cannot happen again. I will not repeat the background to these events, as it's been well covered by colleagues here today, but I want to focus on the action that is being taken following the independent review into the regulation of Football Index, led by Malcolm Sheehan QKC, and I want to thank him for that work. His report examined the regulatory circumstances around the granting of a licence to BetIndex, its subsequent suspension, and the company's ultimate financial failure. Importantly, it identified areas, as others have said today, where the Gambling Commission could have been more effective in responding to the challenges posed by this novel product, and it also highlighted where the FCA could have cooperated more effectively with the Commission. For the Gambling Commission, it recommended that they should enhance its scrutiny of novel products these products are less likely to fit neatly into existing regulatory frameworks, and there is greater risk that they are poorly understood by customers, as colleagues have mentioned today. It recommended closer examination of the language typically associated with investments in financial markets. This language can obscure the fact that a product is actually a gambling product rather than a financial product. And it outlined the need for more prompt decision-making, quicker internal escalation, and greater scrutiny of any differences between described and actual features of products. And finally, the report recommended that the Commission consider whether operators should be required to demonstrate additional levels of liquidity in the case of longer-term tradable bets, like those offered by Football Index. Now, while Football Index was never regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, Mr Sheehan's report recommended that the FCA should also seek to achieve quicker and more consistent decision-making on regulatory responsibility issues. The report concluded that the FCA could have been faster to come to those decisions in regard to the Football Index case and to communicate these to the Gambling Commission. The Gambling Commission and the FCA agreed a formal memorandum of understanding in June 2021, and the Sheehan report described this as an appropriate proactive step. However, it has also made recommendations of how the memorandum could be strengthened. It recommended that memorandum should include an agreed mechanism for resolving disputes over regulatory responsibility, for ensuring that these disputes are identified, discussed and escalated where necessary, and provisions for written recording of meeting outcomes. So it is vital, as the Honourable Lady's debate, the title of the debate points out, that we learn the lessons from this case to ensure that a similar situation does not take place again. And I am pleased to report that all the recommendations of the report for the Commission and the FCA have been implemented in full. The Gambling Commission has taken various actions to achieve this. They've consulted on and updated its Statement of Principles for Licensing and Regulation statement in June 22. It has updated how it assesses risks so that novel products are properly considered. It now undertakes systemic reviews of novel products offered by existing licensees, and it has also increased the resources available to ensure that licenses are disclosing notifiable changes to products. The Commission has also changed its approach to licensing products where long-term bets might appear more like financial products. It has made clear in its Statement of Principles that it will not normally grant a licence to products that use language usually associated with investments or financial products. A number of colleagues at this point raised the issues around advertising, and the Honourable Member for Worsley and Eccles South asked about the Gambling White Paper. Much of the measures, there isn't one single bill we're introducing because we want to ensure that we get as many of those changes done as quickly as possible. We're making good progress on those. I've committed consistently that we'll try and get everything done by the summer. Some of these things will be ready for SIs soon. But some of them are what the Gambling Commission themselves will be implementing. So by splitting it up rather than having one big bill that might take a long time to get through this place, we are proceeding at speed and at pace to be able to bring about those reforms. The FCA has also implemented all of the recommendations from the report too. It has importantly taken steps to improve the speed and consistency of its decision-making, including nominating an executive director to oversee the relationship with the Gambling Commission. An updated Memorandum of Understanding addressing all the review's recommendations was agreed between the Commission and the FCA in November of 22. And this agreement has established a process and timeline for cooperation between the two authorities and a process for escalation, created a relationship owner and primary contact in each authority to oversee the operation of the memorandum, and it also requires a quarterly minuted meeting between the two authorities to ensure that the memorandum is operating as it should. The most recent of these meetings took place yesterday. There are also now ad hoc meetings between the CEOs of those two authorities, which provide an avenue for escalation and regulatory matters if required. And I'm grateful to the Gambling Commission and the FCA for the work to ensure that this important report is acted on and acted on in full. I mentioned David Hamill earlier. I admire the work of the campaign groups such as Football Index Action Group and for the way that they have conducted themselves. I've met with him, as I said, last year. We have had follow-up correspondence. I am taking the evidence, the extra evidence that Mr Hamilton has submitted in relation to the Sheehan review very seriously, and I'm considering, as the Honourable Lady from Blaydon mentioned, whether it would be appropriate and feasible for the evidence provided by Mr Hamill to be scrutinised by someone external to the department. A lot of members mentioned KICS and this new product, which described itself as a football cryptocurrency trading project and bears similarities to Football Index. It involves trading footballers in the form of so-called digital athlete tokens, which are purchased with cryptocurrency. These tokens pay out a yield based on the performance of footballers. It appears that the product is in a test phase and is currently not live, nor does it appear possible to deposit currency. The Gambling Commission is taking proactive steps in relation to KICS. It has written to Honourable Members for Blaydon, Swansea East and Brentford and Isleworth to outline its approach, and it has also written to my department. It's currently reviewing a number of elements of the KICS product. This includes a review by its compliance and legal teams to consider whether, if launched, it would meet the definition of gambling under the Gambling Act 2005. It has also written to the individuals responsible for KICS for further information on this product, their intentions, and to highlight consequences of launching a product which meets the definition of gambling in Great Britain without an appropriate licence. Yes?
Are you saying here that the Gambling Commission and the Gambling Commission alone will decide whether or not KICS are given a licence to bring their product to the marketplace? Because I've got a meeting with the Gambling Commission at 4:30 this afternoon, and I'd like to ask them that question too.
He interrupted me just before I was coming on to say that the Commission and the FCA are already engaging to establish details of the product and for them to both agree the appropriate steps. There have been reports that, as others have said, that 2 individuals previously involved in running Football Index are involved in KICS. Adam Cole was the co-founder of Football Index. He surrendered his personal management licence in September 2021 whilst under review, and the Commission reached findings of fact regarding his involvement with Football Index. These would be considered if he were to make a new application for a personal licence. The Commission also wrote to Abdullah Suleiman, the former head of trading at Football Index, to confirm the nature of his involvement in KICS. Following this letter, he also surrendered his personal management licence on Monday, the 22nd of April. Yes, of course.
Way and recognise that some of the steps that have been taken, but what it comes down to is this: that what we don't want to see is people being taken in the same way as the Football Index took people in. And it's great that those people have given up their personal management licences, but they've already shared their information and used their experience to set up a new system. So what more can we do to make sure that people in the UK are clear about the status of this and it's properly regulated?
Yeah, I was going to come on to that point a little bit further on, but just to reassure colleagues that the Commission will continue to take a very active role in relation to monitoring of this product, and the FCA is also looking into the KICS business and will take appropriate risk-based action if it identifies that any of its activities fall into the FCA's remit. But I will absolutely raise this issue with both again to ensure that everything is being done, because like everybody else here, I don't want this to happen again. And I hope that I can reassure that the Commission has been monitoring the market for several years now for potential products that attempt to replicate Football Index. And there have been several where it has intervened. While it would not be appropriate for me to name these businesses, it demonstrates that the proactive work that the Commission is doing in this area and undertaking in this area. She also raised the issue of Stocks FC. If I could just finish this point, the Gambling Commission is engaged with Stocks FC and is monitoring the company at this very moment, and I will write to the Commission for further information on this particular product and ensure that everything is being done to monitor. I'll happily give way to the Honourable Lady.
And I just want to emphasise the point my honourable friend for Bladen has made, but also to pose the question of, does the Minister actually really think what credibility the Gambling Commission has now, given that so many people have lost so much money? And for them to be posing the question of kicks, is it gambling? If it's based on the Football Index proof of context and it's being advised, you know, the expertise going into it is from Football Index, it's a Football Index kind of Mark II in a different form. And what we've all, what honourable members have all outlined in this debate is, you know, how much this was not an investment and how much this was gambling. And in fact, that's the reason, surely, that the questions of compensation are affected by that, in that the ministers have said that taxpayer money shouldn't be used to compensate people for gambling losses. So it just seems to me, actually, it's just a bit of a joke, really. Is it gambling? Do we have to ask that when it so obviously is?
Well, I understand the point that the Honourable Lady is making, but it is important that these things are looked at properly under the remit of the legislation that exists. And I have to say, the Gambling Commission have done a lot of work in this space to try and bridge or cover that grey area. And I want to come on to that point of the grey area that the Honourable Member for Inverclyde mentioned, because there's the crypto asset side of things brings in another area of work. So I want to assure colleagues in this debate today that I will be speaking to my colleagues in the Treasury just to highlight this issue, to ensure that we do not find ourselves in a position like this again, to ensure that we are addressing each of these issues. I am confident that relationship between the Gambling Commission and the FCA is much improved, that regular meetings that are happening between those two organisations will ensure that there isn't that slip again. But absolutely, to ensure that we get this right, I'm more than happy to speak to colleagues in other departments to ensure that there aren't any cracks that may still exist. I'll quickly give way.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I just want to press the Minister. Can he assure me that he will go away and look at the suggestion made by David Hamill from the Football Index Action Group about a route through to deliver compensation without directly having to take it from the taxpayer?
Well, I think it would be more than my life's worth to commit colleagues in Treasury to a policy. But again, I will happily. I understand the point that she's making. I have seen that suggestion from it. I'm sure that Treasury colleagues will have views on this. So I will raise it with them, but and I will write to the committee following the response to that. So I want to begin again by thanking everyone who's contributed today. I hope that I've been able to provide some clarity around some of the lessons that have been learned from the collapse of this Football Index and the action that has been taken by government, by the Gambling Commission and the FCA as a result. And I really do understand the real consequences that people have felt. And this debate has been invaluable for me to ensure that we consider all of the issues that need addressing and speak to colleagues across government to ensure that we don't see these awful sorts of action happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Twist, to sum up.
Thank you, Mrs Murray. And can I start by thanking everyone who's taken part in this event, the honourable members for Ellesmere Port, Worsley and Eccles, Strangford, Sheffield Brightside and the front benchers from North Ayrshire and Arran, and from Barnsley East. And of course, thank the Minister for his response as well. There are a few points that I'd like to make, and, you know, as is usual these days, people are tweeting points at you all the time as well. So I'm watching that. The main thing I wanted to say is really, as I said earlier, what we all want to do is make sure that we learn from the lessons and make it not possible for people to be fooled in that way again, to be misled in that way again. And that's what our attention must go to. I'm particularly concerned that we don't see people falling through regulatory frameworks, whether that's FCA, whether it's Gambling Commission or any other organisation. It's really important that we not only reach memoranda of understanding, but make sure that it works. And if neither one seems suitable, that we look at what on earth we can do to make sure that the gap is plugged in the meantime. I think that's really important for people. I note the fact the Minister has undertaken to speak to the Treasury, which I think is really helpful, because arguably we could have been having a debate in Treasury time, saying what happened last time and what went wrong there. So I think it's really important that government works together to ensure that people aren't misled, that they aren't required to look at the tiny print at the bottom of a website to find out the status of the scheme. And finally, in kind of news hot off the press, we talked about SCS and that scheme, and I understand there are currently 10,000 users on that scheme, and that you know, we're still looking at it. I don't, of course, expect the Minister to be able to respond on that, but it would be helpful if we could look at that outside of this debate. So can I thank everyone for participating, and let's make sure that the football index isn't allowed to happen again.
Thank you. The question is that this House has considered the lessons learned from the collapse of the football index. As many as are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 4 p.m. Can I ask members to please exit through the door to my right?